Marcus Elroy Washington had served for 22 years. He had enlisted at 18. He had been promoted 7 times. He had deployed to 3 theaters. He had come home at 40 with a Purple Heart, a medical separation, a left leg that worked at 70%, and a black Labrador retriever named Sergeant that the Veterans Administration had paired him with in February of the year following his separation. Sergeant was 72 pounds. He was 4 years old. He wore a red vest with Service Dog Do Not Pet printed in white letters on both sides. He had been trained at the Lakewood Veterans Service Animal Program for 14 months. He alerted for traumatic brain injury episodes. He provided balance support on Marcus's left side during descents and turns. He had been with Marcus for 2 years, and in those 2 years he had performed his function 311 times. Marcus knew the number because he kept a log. The log was in a spiral notebook in the kitchen drawer. He had kept it since week 3. His VA case manager, a woman named Christine Ellison, had asked him to. She had said the log helps us understand how the pairing is working. It also helps you. She was right about that second part. He had not known before the log how often Sergeant was working. After the log he knew. 311 times in 2 years. 72 pounds of black Labrador doing a job that no one else in the room could see him doing. The pairing had happened on a February morning. He had driven to the Lakewood program facility. He had met with the program director, a woman named Janet Cross, who had been running the program for 8 years. She had reviewed his medical file. She had asked him about his daily routine, his living situation, the specific nature of his TBI episodes, and the times of day when they were most likely. She had taken notes. She had said, "I have 3 animals being considered for you. I want to introduce you to each one, and I want you to tell me what you notice." The first 2 animals had been correct. They had been well trained and attentive. He had noted what they did. He had not felt the particular calibration. The third had been Sergeant. Sergeant had been brought in and had crossed the room in 8 steps and had sat down on Marcus's left side without being directed to do so. Marcus had looked at Janet Cross. She had said, "That is his decision. He makes it based on information you and I cannot access." Marcus had put his hand on Sergeant's head. Sergeant had pressed into the touch. Janet had said he has made his assessment. Marcus had said, "How long does this take?" She had said, "You just did it." He had driven home with Sergeant in the back seat. He had not known what to do first. He had fed him. He had shown him the house. Sergeant had moved through the house the way Marcus moved through unfamiliar terrain methodically, without rushing, noting what was in each room without disturbing anything. He had returned to Marcus's left side when he had finished the circuit. He had sat. Marcus had said, "All right." He had said, "We are going to figure this out together." Sergeant had looked at him. Marcus had said, "We start the log on Monday." He had started it on Saturday instead. He had not been able to wait. Marcus's father had been a school custodian for 34 years. His name was Elroy Washington. He had worked at Jefferson Middle School, and then at Riverside High when Jefferson was consolidated. He had known by the 3rd year at Jefferson every student's face and most of their names, not because it was in his job description, because he paid attention. He had told Marcus when Marcus was 12, the building is everybody's job. If something needs doing and you can do it, you do it, and you don't wait to be asked. He had also told him you carry yourself the same way whether anyone is watching or not. Because someone is always watching, or they will be, and what they see should be the same thing either way. Elroy had started at Jefferson at 37. Before that, he had worked at a printing press for 9 years, and before that, he had done warehouse work for 4. He had taken the custodian position because the hours were better and because he wanted to be in a building where children were. He had not had a clean explanation for this preference. He had simply known that it was right. He had been correct. He had spent 34 years in buildings full of children and had found that they were on the whole the most honest audience he had ever performed for. They did not perform back at him. They either saw him or they did not. When they saw him, they spoke to him directly. When they did not, They walked past him as though he were furniture. He had never resented the ones who walked past. He had understood that they were children in a building with many things demanding their attention, and he was the person sweeping the hall. He had also understood that the ones who did see him were giving him something real. He kept a mental list, not of the ones who did not see him, of the ones who did. He had never written it down. He had never needed to. He knew every name. 3 of the students from Jefferson had come to his retirement dinner. One was a civil engineer. One ran a construction company. One was in the state legislature. All 3 had said some version of the same thing. They had said, "You knew my name. You always knew my name. You knew when something was wrong. You knew when something was right. You were there every day and you noticed." Elroy had said that was the job. The job was to be there and to notice. They had said it was more than that. He had not disagreed with them. He had simply said, "I was glad to be in the building." He had meant it. Marcus had carried that for 30 years. He had carried it through 22 years of service. He had carried it through 3 deployments and 7 promotions and 1 IED in Kandahar province that had taken 4 months of rehabilitation and left him with the 70% leg and the TBI and the nightmares that came in the period between 2 and 4 in the morning and did not respond to any of the medications the VA had tried until Sergeant arrived. He had enlisted at 18 because he believed in the structure. He had believed in the clarity of a mission and a team and a chain of command. He had also believed and continued to believe long after circumstances gave him reasons to doubt that the institution he served was supposed to be better than the worst of what any single person in it did. He had believed that the way his father believed it about the school, the building, is bigger than any one person's bad day. The building has a purpose. Your job is to serve the purpose and not let anyone's bad day become the whole story of the place. In his first deployment, he had been a motor transport operator. He drove supply routes through terrain that changed without warning. He had learned to read road conditions the way Diane the pharmacist read prescription schedules completely in advance without rushing. He had transported without incident for 11 months. He had come home and been promoted and gone back. In his second deployment, he had been promoted to staff sergeant and given a team. He had 8 people under him. He had known their names before they arrived because he had read every file. He had known who had children at home and who was struggling with the climate and who needed to be given a specific kind of direction and who would do better with latitude. He had not learned to do this. He had watched his father do it for 34 years and absorbed it. He led the way. Elroy had been a custodian. You notice what needs doing, and you do it without waiting to be asked, and you know each person's name. All 8 of his team came home from the second deployment. He did not attach significance to this publicly. He attached it privately in the way he kept track of everything. In the third deployment, 14 months after the photograph, the IED happened on a supply run in Kandahar province on a Tuesday morning at 9:42. He remembered the time because he had looked at his watch 60 seconds before. The route had been cleared the previous day. Cleared routes were not always clear. He knew this. He had not known that route would not be clear. He had driven it anyway because it was the route, and the route had been cleared and the mission required the route. He had survived because he had been in the rear left seat and the device had detonated forward and right. The driver and the gunner were evacuated with him. All 3 of them lived. The vehicle did not. He was in the surgical unit in 4 hours and in the rehabilitation program in Germany in 3 days. The left leg had sustained damage to the tibia and the soft tissue above the knee. The nerve damage was the part that had taken longest to understand. He had been told it would be 70%. He had learned what 70% meant in practice. The morning was better than the afternoon. The cold was worse than the warm stairs required thought, and rails and long distances required the pace his father had used walking the school corridors, deliberate, unhurried present. He had made 70% sufficient. He had decided to do that in the first month of rehabilitation. He had not revisited the decision since. His mother, Alma, had been a church organist for 41 years. She had played the same organ at First Presbyterian on Halsey Street since Marcus was 3. The organ had been donated by the Whitmore family in 1961. It had been restored once in 1987. Alma had been the one who noticed it needed restoring. She had been the one who told Pastor Clement and written the letter to the Whitmore Family Foundation and organized the fundraising drive that covered the remaining costs. She had done all of this while playing the organ every Sunday and twice a week for choir rehearsal and had not mentioned it to anyone as an accomplishment. She had mentioned it to Marcus once obliquely when he was in his second deployment, and she had written him a letter. She had said, "I got the organ restored." He had written back how. She had written, "I noticed it needed it, and I took care of it. That is all." Alma had learned to play at 11. Her teacher had been a woman named Mrs. Henrietta Park, who had given lessons in her front room on Fenton Street every Saturday morning. Mrs. Park had told Alma's mother after the first lesson, "This one hears the space between the notes. Most students hear the notes. This one hears what lives between them." Alma had played the organ at First Presbyterian since the previous organist, Mr. Dawson, had retired in 1983. She had not applied for the position. She had been playing for choir rehearsal for 3 years as a volunteer, and one Sunday when the hired organist had a family emergency, Pastor Clement had asked if she could fill in for the service. She had played the service. He had never hired someone else. That had been 41 years ago. She had a notebook of her own. She kept it at the organ bench. Every Sunday she wrote the hymns they had played and a note about the congregation that day. Not the size of the congregation. Something she had noticed. A woman in the third pew who had closed her eyes during the second hymn and had not opened them until the prayer. A child who had mouthed all the words to "come by here" before falling asleep against his father's arm. A man in the back who had come in late and sat alone and had been crying silently during the benediction and who had left before anyone could speak to him. She wrote these things, not to analyze them, to record them, to say, "I saw you. I was playing and I was watching and I saw you. The music was for you specifically because I saw you." Marcus had known about the notebook since he was 9. He had found it once by accident and had read 3 entries. He had not told her he had read it. He had understood from that moment without being able to articulate it yet what it meant to do your work with your whole attention on the person it was for. He had that letter. He kept it in the box with his service medals and his separation papers and the photograph from his second deployment in which he and his unit were standing in front of a vehicle that would be destroyed by an IED 18 months later. He had not been in the vehicle that day. He had been in a different vehicle that day. He had been in the vehicle that was destroyed 14 months after that photograph on the 3rd tour when the leg sustained the damage that ended his career. He kept the photograph because the 4 men in it with him were all still alive. He thought 4 alive. That is not nothing. That is something to account for. He was living in the house on Prentice Avenue. He had bought it 4 years ago with his separation pay and the VA loan he had qualified for. 3 bedrooms. One he used as an office. One he kept for when his daughter Simone visited. Simone was 19. She was studying nursing at Claremont Community College. She had chosen nursing because of 2 things. The first was watching Marcus in the rehabilitation program. Not the injury, the nurses. She had come to visit him in the rehabilitation center on 3 weekends when she was 16. She had watched the nurses work. She had watched a woman named Ruth, who was a night shift nurse and who had come in at the start of her shift every night and spent 11 minutes with each patient before the shift began formally. 11 minutes was not in the job description. Ruth did it because she said, "If I know what kind of night you had before I got here, I can take better care of you during mine." Simone had watched this and had decided. The second thing was her grandmother Alma. She had told Alma what she had decided. Alma had said that is exactly right. She had said the people who do the work carefully for the person who needs it without asking for credit, those are the ones who hold things together. She had said you will be one of those. Simone had written that down. She was the kind of person who wrote things down. She had gotten that from both of her parents. She visited on the first Sunday of every month and cooked dinner and did not ask Marcus about the leg or the TBI unless he raised it. He had asked her once to do that. She had said, "I figured." She had been 17 when he asked. She was already a person who did not require instruction about the things that mattered. He walked Sargent every morning at 7. The route was the same. Prentice to Callaway to the park and back, 1 mile and 4 blocks. He did it slowly because the leg needed the deliberate pace. He did not find this frustrating. He had learned in the first year after separation that frustration with the body's limits was a form of energy expenditure that produced nothing. He had learned to give the body what it needed and to make what it could do sufficient. He had not always believed this. He believed it now. The walk was also, he had learned, part of Sargent's working day. Not the alerting, not the balance support. The survey. Sargent walked the route the way Elroy had walked the school corridors methodically, with attention to what was there and what had changed. He noted in the way that dogs noted things the new smell at the corner of Callaway, the shift in the pigeons near the park bench, the presence or absence of the man who fed them every Tuesday. He logged it all somewhere that Marcus could not access. He brought the information back to the house on Prentice Avenue every morning. He was in his way doing reconnaissance. He was mapping the territory that he and Marcus moved through. He was understanding it so that he could do his job better in it. Marcus had thought about this on the third morning of the walk when Sargent had altered course slightly at the park entrance and taken him around a section of pavement that Marcus had not noticed was uneven. He had looked at the pavement afterward. The grade was slight, not noticeable at a casual pace. Sargent had noticed it on the first walk. He had adjusted on the third. He had learned the route, and he had applied what he knew to what Marcus needed. That was the training. That was also something beyond the training. That was a decision made on Marcus's behalf with information Marcus did not have. He had written that in the notebook, too. Not as a log entry, as a note. He had written, "He knows things about the route that I don't know yet. He trusts me to follow when he adjusts. I am going to trust him." He had kept that trust every day since. He needed to go to the pharmacy. It was a Wednesday. The pharmacy was on Commerce Street. He drove when the weather was cold because the legs stiffened in cold air. The weather was cold. He drove. He parked in the accessible parking space in front of the pharmacy. He displayed his placard. He got out. Sargent got out on the left side, vest on. They went into the pharmacy. He collected his prescriptions. He spoke briefly with the pharmacist, a woman named Diane, who had been at the Commerce Street location for 11 years, and who always confirmed his prescription schedule and asked whether there had been changes from the VA. There had not been changes. He thanked her. He and Sargent went back to the car. He was putting Sargent into the back seat when Officer Dennis Pruitt pulled into the lot. What Sargent had done for Marcus in 2 years was not visible to anyone who had not watched it closely. Christine Ellison had watched it. She had done a home visit in month 3 and had sat in the kitchen on Prentice Avenue for 2 hours and watched Marcus and Sargent together. She had seen Sargent alert twice during that visit. Once when Marcus reached for the cabinet above the refrigerator, a motion that required him to raise his left arm and rotate his body, and Sargent had moved to his left side without being asked and pressed his shoulder against Marcus's hip. Once when Marcus was describing the third deployment and had paused mid-sentence. Sargent had put his head on Marcus's knee before Marcus had finished the pause. Marcus had put his hand on Sargent's head. He had finished the sentence. Christine had written in her notes pairing functioning at level 4 integration. This was the highest level she measured. It meant the animal's responses were anticipatory rather than reactive. Sargent was not responding to what was happening. He was responding to what was about to happen. She had told Marcus what she had observed. He had said, "I know." She had said, "Does it feel that way?" He had said, "It feels like having someone on my six." She had said, "Yes." She had said, "That is a very good description." The log had reached 311 by the Wednesday of the pharmacy incident. Every entry had a date and a time, and a one-sentence description of what Sergeant had done and why Marcus had logged it. Entry 1. Balance support descending front porch stairs, first week, held contact for 4 steps. Entry 47. Alert kitchen 9, 23 p.m., placed head on knee, maintained contact 3 minutes. Entry 112. Alert parking lot. Riverside Medical Center. Body press left side during wait for wheelchair maintained until chair arrived. Entry 231 balance support stairwell Prentice Fee. A office held contact for full flight. Each entry was brief. Each entry was complete. The log was not a record of Marcus's distress. It was a record of Sergeant doing his work. 311 entries of a 72-pound black Labrador doing a job that most people in the room would never see him doing. Pruitt was 29 years old. He had been with the department for 4 years. He drove the Commerce Street corridor. He had pulled into the pharmacy lot on what he would later describe to his supervisor as a routine patrol. He had seen Marcus standing at the car. He had seen Sergeant. He had watched Marcus open the back door and begin to settle the dog. He had decided something in that time. He pulled into the space adjacent to the accessible space blocking part of Marcus's exit path. He got out of the patrol car. He said, "Sir, is that a real service dog?" Marcus turned. He looked at Pruitt. He looked at the patrol car. He said, "Yes." He said, "He is a certified VA-trained service animal." He said his vest has his credentials. Pruitt said, "I need to verify that." He said there have been complaints in this area about fake service animals. Marcus said, "What complaint number?" Pruitt said, "I am sorry." Marcus said, "You said there have been complaints. I am asking for the complaint number so I can confirm this is a complaint-based inquiry." Pruitt did not produce a complaint number. He said it is a general concern. Marcus said his certification is on the vest. The vest is a federal service animal vest issued through the Veterans Administration. He said, "I am a disabled veteran. This is my service animal." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a card. He said this is his identification card issued by the Lakewood Veterans Service Animal Program. The program number is on the card. The VA regional office number is on the back. You can call them. He said his certification is current. Pruitt took the card. He looked at it. He looked at Sergeant. He said, "I need to confirm this is a genuine vest." Marcus said it is a genuine vest. You are looking at it. Pruitt said there are counterfeit vests available for purchase online. Marcus said, "This is not a counterfeit vest." He said, "If you look at the back of the card I gave you, you will find the VA program number. They can confirm the vest, the registration, the training certification, and my treatment file." He said, "I was in the United States Army for 22 years. I was medically separated. This animal was paired with me by the Veterans Administration." Pruitt said, "I need you to step over here." Marcus said, "I am standing at my car. My car is in the accessible space. My placard is displayed." He said, "I have given you his identification card." He said, "I have told you the VA verification number. Is there a specific law I have violated?" Pruitt said, "I am conducting a welfare check on the animal." Marcus looked at Sergeant. Sergeant was sitting on the back seat with his vest on and his attention fully on Marcus's face, which was how Sergeant always sat when they were stopped somewhere unfamiliar. He was not distressed. He was not in any physical discomfort. His water bowl was in the car. His veterinary records were in the house on Prentice Avenue where they had always been. He had been examined by a VA-contracted veterinarian 6 weeks ago. Marcus said the animal is in good health and is under regular veterinary supervision. He said his next scheduled examination is in 4 months. He said the veterinarian is Dr. Nadine Carver at the East Side Animal Clinic. She can confirm his status. He said, "I will ask again, is there a specific law I have violated?" Pruitt said, "I need you to step away from the vehicle." Marcus said no. He said, "I am standing at my car." My placard is displayed. I have provided my service animal's documentation. I have provided the VA verification number. I have violated no law. He said if you have a specific and articulable reason for requiring me to step away from my vehicle, I would like to hear it. He said this the way he said everything. Even. Not loud. Certain. He had deployed twice to places where the information that was relevant to staying alive had to be communicated clearly without elevation and received correctly. He had learned to speak in a way that did not allow for misinterpretation. He used that register now. Pruitt said, "I am going to call this in." He went back to his patrol car. He sat in it. He did not leave. Marcus leaned against his car. He put his hand down beside his left thigh. Sergeant moved forward on the back seat and pressed his muzzle against Marcus's hand. That was the support gesture. Sergeant knew when Marcus needed it. He needed it now. Not because he was frightened, because he was working to maintain the even register while something in his chest wanted to do something different. His father's voice was in his head. You carry yourself the same way whether anyone is watching or not. He was being watched. He carried himself the same way. He thought about his unit. He thought about the 4 alive in the photograph. He thought about what it had cost to be one of the 4 alive. He thought, I have survived things that would have stopped a lesser version of myself. This parking lot is not going to be where I fall apart. He looked at the pharmacy. He looked at the Commerce Street signal. He looked at Sergeant's ears. Sergeant's ears were up. He was watching Marcus's face. He was doing his job. There was a security camera on the pharmacy awning. Marcus had not noticed it when he arrived. He noticed it now. It was pointed at the accessible parking area. He thought, it has been recording since I pulled in. He thought, good. That is the record. Let it be a complete record. Pruitt was on the radio for 7 minutes. Marcus stood by the car. He thought about the 22 years. He thought about the supply routes and the team files and the 8 people who came home from the second deployment. He thought about rehabilitation in Germany and the woman there, a physical therapist named Sergeant Fisher, not related to Sergeant the dog. The coincidence had amused him, who had told him in week 3, you are ahead of where most people are at this point. He had said, because I decided in week 1 what I was going to do. She had said, yes, that is why. Decisions made at the beginning hold the work together when the middle is hard. He thought, I made a decision at the beginning of this interaction. I stated clearly who I was and what I had with me. I provided the documentation. I did not raise my voice. I did not step back. I stated the law as I understood it, and I asked the questions that the law allowed me to ask. I am going to continue doing that. That was the decision. He was in the middle now. The decision held. He thought about Elroy. He thought about the 8 sentences. He had been 12 when his father had said them. They had been standing in the school parking lot after a parent conference. A teacher had said something to Elroy that had not been appropriate, and Elroy had not responded in kind. Marcus had asked on the walk to the car, why did you let him say that? Elroy had stopped. He had said, I did not let him say anything. He said what he said. I chose what I did with it. He had said 8 things. He said the first is, know who you are before anyone speaks. The second is, let them finish before you respond. The third is, ask for what you need specifically by name. The fourth is, if the record is on your side, refer to the record. The fifth is, do not let someone else's agitation set your temperature. The sixth is your body and your voice are the record that everyone can see. The seventh is the people who are watching are always taking notes. The eighth is when it is over, write your own. Marcus had memorized them before they got home. He had used all 8 in 22 years of service. He had used all 8 in the parking lot on Commerce Street. He used them now, standing by the car while Pruitt sat in his patrol vehicle. Then he got out. He said, I'm going to need to see your disabled parking permit registration. Marcus said, it is on the placard. The placard number is on the registration in the glove compartment. He retrieved the registration. He gave it to Pruitt. Pruitt looked at it. Pruitt looked at the placard. He said, "This expires in 9 months." Marcus said yes. He said the expiration date is printed on it. A woman had come out of the pharmacy while Pruitt was on the radio. Her name was Grace Okonkwo. She was 63 years old. She had been waiting for her prescription when Marcus had come in. She had seen him speak with Diane. She had watched him leave. She had been at the pharmacy window when Pruitt pulled into the lot. She had watched the interaction from the window. She had asked Diane to call her prescription in 30 minutes instead of now. She stood by the pharmacy entrance. She watched. She had her phone out. She was not filming. She was holding her phone in case she needed to. She was watching in case the need arose. She had lived in this city for 40 years. She had watched enough situations to know the difference between a situation that resolved and one that did not. She was watching this one to find out which kind it was. A second car arrived 8 minutes after Pruitt had returned to his patrol vehicle. It was a second unit. The officer who got out was a woman. Her name was Officer Karen Reyes. She had been with the department for 9 years. She had been a crisis intervention specialist for the last 3. She walked to Pruitt. They spoke for 2 minutes. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Sergeant. She looked at the vest. She walked to Marcus. She said, "Sir, I am Officer Reyes. I am a crisis intervention specialist." She said, "I understand there has been a concern about your service animals' documentation." Marcus said, "I have provided the identification card issued by the Lakewood Veterans Service Animal Program. I have provided the VA verification number. I have provided my disabled parking permit registration." He said the documentation is in order. He said Officer Pruitt has been unable to produce a complaint number for the welfare complaint he referenced. He said, "I have not moved my vehicle and I have not raised my voice." He said, "I would like to know the basis for this ongoing detention." Reyes said, "I understand." She said, "Can I see the service animal card?" Marcus said, "Officer Pruitt has it." She looked at Pruitt. Pruitt gave her the card. She read it. She looked at the vest. She looked at Sergeant. She said, "What program is this?" Marcus said, "Lakewood Veterans Service Animal Program. 14 months of training. He has been with me for 2 years. He is certified for TBY alert and balance support." Reyes said, "May I approach the animal?" Marcus said, "You may." He said, "Do not reach for his vest." He said, "You can speak to him and he will respond to his name. His name is Sergeant." Reyes crouched down at a respectful distance. She said, "Sergeant." Sergeant looked at her. His tail moved once. He was calm. His attention returned immediately to Marcus's face. She stood. She said, "He is clearly trained." She said, "I am going to call the VA verification line on this card." She called. She was on the phone for 4 minutes. She came back. She said, "Everything is confirmed. His registration, his training certification, his pairing with you. It is all in the VA system." She said, "I'm sorry for the delay." She said, "You are free to go." Marcus said, "I have a question before I go." He said Officer Pruitt referenced complaints about counterfeit service animals in this area. He said, "I would like to know the complaint number." Reyes said, "I will look into that." Marcus said, "I appreciate that." He said, "If there is no complaint on file, I would like that noted." He got in the car. He looked at the pharmacy awning camera. He thought that camera has been running this entire time. He drove home. He sat at the table in the kitchen. He opened the spiral notebook. He wrote the date and the time and the location. He wrote, "Detained at Commerce Street Pharmacy, accessible parking space service. Animal documentation questioned, no specific law cited. No complaint number produced. Verified by Officer Reyes through VA line documentation. Confirmed released without citation." He wrote camera on pharmacy awning, confirm footage with pharmacy management. He wrote total time 31 minutes. He closed the notebook. He poured water for Sergeant. He sat at the table for a while. He thought about his father. He thought about the building as everybody's job. He thought about what it meant to carry yourself the same way whether anyone is watching or not. He had done that. He thought I did that. He thought I did exactly that. He thought the camera saw it. The camera saw the whole thing, and it will say what it saw. He called Christine Ellison at the VA. She had been his case manager for 3 years. He told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. She said, "You have the notebook entry." He said yes. She said the card was returned to you. He said yes. She said, "I want you to go to the pharmacy management tomorrow morning and ask about the camera footage." She said, "I am going to make a note in your file about this incident." She said, "This is the kind of thing that needs to be documented on our end as well." He said, "I know." She said, "Marcus." He said, "Yes." She said, "You did everything right." He said, "I know." She said, "I mean it." He said, "I know you mean it." He called his father that evening. Elroy was 71. He had retired from Riverside High 3 years ago. He still went in twice a year to help with the district inventory. He answered on the second ring. Marcus told him what had happened. Elroy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Where is Sergeant?" Marcus said, sitting on the floor next to me. Elroy said, "How is he?" Marcus said, "He is fine. He did his job. He did his job the whole time." Elroy said, "I know." He said, "How are you?" Marcus said, "I'm all right." He said, "I was a little angry for a while." He said, "I stayed in my register." Elroy said, "I know you did." Marcus said, "How do you know?" Elroy said, "Because you are telling me about it instead of telling me what happened after." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He said, "That is correct." Elroy said, "Good." He said, "What is next?" Marcus said, "The camera footage, tomorrow morning." Elroy said, "Good." He said, "Call me after." The pharmacy manager was a man named Douglas Farrell. He had managed the Commerce Street location for 8 years. He had the security footage from the previous day already saved when Marcus came in the next morning. He said, "Diane told me what happened when she finished her shift." He said, "I pulled the footage last night." He said, "It shows the accessible space, the entire interaction, and it has a timestamp." He said, "I will give you a copy." He said, "I am also going to contact the department's community relations office." He said, "I want it on record that this happened at my store and that I have the footage." Marcus said, "I appreciate that." The footage was 2 hours and 14 minutes from when Marcus pulled in to 30 minutes after he drove away. It showed the placard being displayed. It showed Marcus and Sergeant entering the pharmacy. It showed them exiting. It showed Pruitt arriving. It showed Pruitt blocking the exit path. It showed the full interaction. It showed Marcus's posture throughout, still upright even. It showed Sergeant's behavior attentive, calm, professional. It showed Grace Okonkwo standing at the pharmacy entrance with her phone in her hand, watching. It showed Reyes arriving. It showed Reyes calling the VA line. It showed Marcus driving away 31 minutes after Pruitt had pulled in. Marcus filed the formal complaint that afternoon. He wrote it at the kitchen table. He used the notebook entry as his timeline. He stated the facts in order. He stated what documentation had been provided and at what point. He stated the absence of a complaint number. He stated the 31-minute duration. He attached the pharmacy footage drive. He submitted the complaint to the department's Internal Affairs Office and to the Veterans Affairs Advocacy Office. He sent a copy to Christine Ellison. He sent a copy to a veterans' rights organization whose number he had gotten from his separation counselor 4 years ago and never needed until now. He sent 1 copy to his father. Elroy called him that evening. He said, "You have all of it." Marcus said, "I have all of it." Elroy said, "Good." He said, "You were there. You did the work. The camera was there. It did its work." He said, "The building is everybody's job." Marcus said, "I know, Dad." Elroy said, "I know you know." The formal review took 12 days. The review board examined the pharmacy footage, the VA verification logs, the Lakewood program certification records, Pruitt's activity log for the day, and Pruitt's 4-year service record. They found that Pruitt had not documented a complaint number because there was no documented complaint. They found that the welfare concern cited had no record in dispatch logs for the preceding week on the Commerce Street corridor. They found that Pruitt had been unable to articulate a specific legal basis for asking Marcus to step away from his vehicle. They found that the footage was consistent in every detail with Marcus's written account. The review board also spent time with the footage specifically. They watched it from the moment Marcus pulled in to the moment he drove away. They noted the placard. They noted the vest. They noted Marcus providing the card at the first request. They noted the 31-minute duration. They noted the posture. They noted Sergeant sitting in the backseat vest on attention on Marcus's face throughout. They noted the moment when Sergeant pressed his muzzle to Marcus's hand. They noted that Marcus did not look away from Pruitt at that moment. He received the support and maintained the conversation. That was in the footage. They noted it because they understood what it meant. A man in a parking lot managing something that the camera could not see, supported by a trained animal who could, while continuing to speak clearly and without elevation to the person who had stopped him. They also found 2 prior complaints in Pruitt's 4-year file. Both were informal. Neither had resulted in formal action. Both involved a pattern of questioning the legitimacy of documentation belonging to black residents, one involving a business license, one involving a parking permit. This was the 3rd incident of the same pattern. The board chair, a deputy commissioner named Lenora Marsh, who had been with the department for 26 years, wrote in the formal review summary, "The documentation presented by Mr. Washington was complete, current, and legally sufficient before Officer Pruitt made initial contact." She wrote the 31-minute duration of the stop was not required by the documentation. It was not required by any articulable legal basis. She wrote, "We have now reviewed 3 incidents in which Officer Pruitt questioned the legitimacy of documentation held by a black resident, when the documentation was in each instance valid and sufficient." She wrote the pattern is identified. The corrective measures are as specified. A 4th incident will not be treated as a pattern. It will be treated as a choice. The distinction matters. The review board issued a formal reprimand. They required 14 hours of mandatory training in service animal law and documentation-based protocols. They required Pruitt to complete a 45-day supervised rotation with a senior officer who had been nominated by the Crisis Intervention Unit. They sent his record to the chief of police with a notation that a 3rd incident of this pattern after these corrective measures would result in a recommendation for termination review. The department also issued a general order on service animal documentation. The order specified that an officer may ask whether an animal is a service animal and what it is trained to do. The order specified that the animal's vest and identification card constitute sufficient documentation under federal law, and that additional verification may be sought only when the card's issuing program cannot be confirmed. The order specified the VA verification line number. It was issued department-wide. It was read at all district roll calls for 3 consecutive weeks. The Veterans Rights Organization had a staff attorney named Paulette Grayson who had worked veteran disability cases for 14 years. She had seen every kind of documentation dispute that arose between veterans with service animals and institutions that did not understand the law. She had seen cases involving employers' transit systems, hotels, restaurants, and 3 other law enforcement encounters. In all of those cases, she had found the same pattern: the documentation was correct, and the institution had not read it. She had won all of them. She had not won them because she was a brilliant attorney, though she was a careful one. She had won them because the documentation was correct, and when someone read the full record, the record said the same thing every time. She called Marcus on the 9th day of the review. She said your documentation was complete from the moment Pruitt approached you. She said the pharmacy footage makes this unambiguous. She said you did everything right. He said, I know. She said, how is Sergeant? He said, he is here. He did his job. She said, I know he did. She said, I'm going to make sure the department knows that what you had with you was exactly what the law requires and nothing more was legally justified. He said, I appreciated that. He said, I would like that in writing. She said, you will have it. She also told him something she said to every veteran she worked with after a case concluded. She said, what you built in those 31 minutes, the calm, the record, the compliance with the law while insisting on your rights under it, that is the foundation that everything else is built on. She said without that, the footage is interesting. With that, the footage is conclusive. She said the building starts with you. He thought that is what his father had been saying for 34 years, in other words. He did not say this to her. He thanked her. He hung up. He wrote it in the notebook. Not as a log entry, as a note. He wrote, "She said the building starts with you." He wrote, "I know. I learned that from a man who swept the floors for 34 years and knew every student's name, Omaha." The Tribune ran a story. The reporter was a man named David Akins, who covered veteran affairs and city government. He had been covering the intersection of those two things for 7 years. He understood what a service animal meant in federal law and what it meant in practice. He had written 3 previous stories about VA pairing programs and understood the difference between a support animal and a trained service animal. He did not need to be educated on that point. He needed Marcus's account and Marcus's specific details. He interviewed Marcus for 40 minutes at the house on Prentice Avenue. Sargent sat on the floor between them during the interview. Akins had asked Marcus if that was usual. Marcus said he sits where he can see my face. Akins said, and that is how he monitors. Marcus said that is part of it. He said he also monitors my body. He said there are things he picks up before I am aware of them. He said that is the training. Akins said, "What did he pick up today?" Marcus said he knew I was working through something. He provided the support gesture. He sat on the back seat and pressed his muzzle against my hand. He held that until I had it. Akins said, "How long did that take?" Marcus said 2 minutes, maybe 3. He had it by the time Pruitt came back from the patrol car. Akins said, "What do you want people to understand about what happened?" Marcus said the documentation was complete before Pruitt spoke to me. He said the vest is a federal service animal vest issued through the VA. He said the card had a verification number on it. He said that is exactly and precisely what the law requires. He said what happened for 31 minutes was not a verification process. He said a verification process takes 6 seconds when you call the number on the card. He said what happened for 31 minutes was something else. He said, "I want people to understand the difference." Akins said, "And Sargent." Marcus looked at the dog. He said Sargent did his job. He said he did his job throughout. He said that is entry 312. Akins said, "You keep a log." Marcus said, "Since week 3. He said 312 entries. He said the log says what he does and when. He said the pharmacy camera says what I did and when. He said if you read both documents, you get the whole picture. He said that is the whole picture. Akins used that paragraph verbatim. He checked it against the footage. The footage confirmed it. He confirmed with Christine Ellison that the log existed and what it contained. He confirmed with Paulette Grayson what the law said. He called the Lakewood Veteran Service Animal Program and confirmed the certification. He called the VA verification line and confirmed the pairing registration. He wrote the article from the record. The article said what the record said. The record was complete. The article ran on Sunday. The headline was, "Disabled Veteran Says Officer Questioned His Service Dog Without Legal Basis. Camera footage supports his account." The department released a statement confirming the formal review and the outcome. They acknowledged the footage. They referenced the new general order. The Veterans' Rights Organization posted the statement alongside a summary of service animal law. It was shared 4,000 times in the first 2 days. Paulette Grayson gave a brief interview on the local radio station. She said a service animal vest and identification card from a certified program are exactly what the law requires. She said an officer who demands more without documented justification is operating outside the legal framework. She said the footage from this incident is going to be used in our training materials for every advocate we work with going forward. Grace Okonkwo had written a statement. She had submitted it to the department's Community Affairs Office. She had also sent it to Marcus directly. She said I stood at that pharmacy entrance for 31 minutes, and I watched the whole thing. I have lived in this city for 40 years. I know what I was watching. She said the man by the car never raised his voice. The dog never raised his. Whatever was being questioned, neither of them gave it any reason to be. She said, I want that on record. I am putting it on record now. Grace had been born in this city. She had gone to Roosevelt Elementary and Jefferson Middle and had left the state for college and had come back at 23. She had worked as a school librarian for 32 years. She had retired from the branch on Halsey Street 2 years ago. She had spent 32 years in a building with children and had learned over those years to read a room. To read what was happening in the space between what was being said and what was actually going on. She had seen in the pharmacy parking lot a man who knew exactly what the situation was and had decided in advance what he was going to do about it. She had seen the dog watching the man's face. She had seen the documentation handed over. She had seen the card taken and not returned immediately. She had seen the posture. She had stayed. She had written the statement in 2 drafts. The first had contained more of what she felt about what she had seen. The second had contained only what she had observed. She sent the second one. She had learned from 32 years of reading to children that the story itself is enough. You do not need to tell the listener what to feel. You tell them what happened. They will feel the right thing. She had also gone back to the pharmacy the following morning and spoken to Douglas Farrell. She had asked, "Do you have it all?" He had said, "I have everything from the time he pulled in." She had said, "Good." She had said, "I want to make sure the footage does not disappear." He had said, "It is saved. Multiple copies." She had said, "Good." She had left. Marcus read her statement at the kitchen table. He read it twice. He put it in the box with the service medals and the separation papers and the letter from his mother about the organ. He thought about the box for a long time. He had acquired the box the month he came home from Germany. It had been sitting in the closet when he found it. He did not know where it had come from. His sister, Jeanette, had cleaned the apartment while he was in rehabilitation and had organized things. She had put some things in the box. He had added to it since. The box was not a trophy case. It did not hold only the good things. It held the significant things. The Purple Heart was in there. So was the discharge paperwork that listed the nature of the injury and the clinical language that the military used for things that had cost a person something. So was the photograph. So was a note from his second deployment team that they had passed around and each signed and sent to him in Germany. 8 signatures. 8 alive. So was a business card from Janet Cross at the Lakewood program. So was the letter from Alma about the organ. So was the card Sergeant had come with the identification card from the Lakewood program with the VA verification number on the back. He had a copy of it. The original was in the box. He put Grace Okonkwo's statement in the box. He put Paulette Grayson's letter in the box. He put a copy of the formal review summary in the box. He put a copy of the department's general order on service animal documentation in the box. He did not put these things in the box because they were victories. He put them in because they were what happened. They were the record of a Wednesday in February on Commerce Street outside the pharmacy. A man with a dog and a placard and a card with a verification number on it. An officer who did not read the card. A second officer who did. A camera that ran the whole time. A woman who stayed at the pharmacy entrance for 31 minutes and watched. A phone call to a case manager. A call to a father. A notebook entry. A formal complaint. A review. A general order. An article. That was the whole thing. That was all of it. He put it in the box so the box would say this happened. I was there. I handled it. The record is complete. He thought about the box. He thought about what went in it. He thought the things that cost something go in the box. Not because they are defeats. Because they are part of the record. The record of what it cost, and what was in him when it cost that much, and what he did with the cost. He thought about Alma. He thought about the organ. He thought she noticed it needed restoring and she took care of it. That is all. He thought that is a complete life philosophy in 12 words. He thought she never mentioned it except in a letter. She did not need to mention it. The organ was restored. That was the whole record. He opened the notebook. He wrote, Grace Okonkwo statement received, submitted to Department Community Affairs, copy received and filed. He wrote Paulette Grayson letter received, placed in file. He wrote formal review, concluded outcomes, as documented, new general order issued. He wrote total elapsed time from incident to review conclusion 12 days. He wrote Sergeant, at all times, calm, professional, attentive, and performing his function exactly as trained. He wrote 312. He closed the notebook. He put it in the kitchen drawer. He looked at Sergeant. Sergeant was lying on the kitchen rug. His vest was on the hook by the door. He was watching Marcus's face. Marcus said, "Good boy." Sergeant's tail moved once. He thought about his father. He thought about the 34 years. He thought about the building is everybody's job. He thought I was in that parking lot and I did not step back from what the law said and what the documentation showed and what Sergeant was doing and who I am. He thought the camera recorded the whole thing. He thought the camera and the notebook and Grace Okonkwo's statement and Christine Ellison's case notes and Paulette Grayson's letter and the VA verification log are all one record. They all say the same thing. They say he was there. He had the documentation. The animal was legitimate. The man was legitimate. Everything about that parking lot from the moment the placard went up to the moment the car pulled away was exactly what it appeared to be. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was irregular. Everything was in order. He had served 22 years to protect the principle that the law applies to everyone equally. He had believed that principle when he enlisted at 18. He had deployed for it. He had been injured in the service of it. He still believed it. He would keep believing it. He would also keep the notebook. Simone had called him the evening after the article ran. She had read it. She had said, "Dad." He had said, "Yes." She had said, "You did the 8 things." He had said, "How do you know the 8 things?" She had said, "Grandpa told me. He told me when I was 14. Marcus had been quiet for a moment. He had said he told you when you were 14. She had said he said your father has 8 things he carries. He told me what they were. He said when the time comes and you need them, use them. Marcus had said, "What did you say?" She had said, "I said, what if the time doesn't come?" He had said it comes for everybody. The question is whether you have the 8 things ready. She had said, "Dad, I have been keeping them since I was 14. He had said, "I know, I can tell." She had said, "Sergeant, too. He has them, too." Marcus had looked at Sergeant lying on the kitchen rug. He had said, "Yes. He does, in his own way." Sergeant's tail moved once. He had heard his name. He was watching Marcus's face. He was doing his job. He would always be doing his job. He would keep logging Sergeant's work. He would keep noting the 312, the 313, the 314. All of the times Sergeant had done his job in a world that did not always see the job being done. The job was being done. It had always been done. The log said so. 312 entries. And the camera at the pharmacy. And Grace Okonkwo's 40 years in this city. And Elroy's 34 years of not waiting to be asked. And Alma's organ restored and playing. The record was complete. It had always been complete. Marcus had just made sure someone read it. He thought that is what the whole thing comes down to. The documentation existed before Pruitt arrived. The vest existed, the card existed, the placard existed. The VA verification system existed, the log existed, the camera existed. None of those things became true when they were verified. They were true before. They were true from the moment Marcus pulled into the parking space. What Reyes did and what the review board did and what Douglas Farrell did with the footage and what Paulette Grayson did with the law was not create the truth. They found it. They read it. They said, "Yes, this is what the record says." and the record had been saying it the whole time. 31 minutes, 312 log entries, 34 years of a man learning every student's name, 41 years of a woman playing an organ she restored herself, 22 years of a son carrying 8 sentences into every situation they would need to carry him through. All of it in the record. All of it there from the beginning, waiting for someone to read it. Subscribe our channel. We find the record and we read what it says.